All right, so a lot of people want to know, like, actually, what is tuning of a bait? There's many different ways that you can tune baits, from like the smallest of things, from split rings, down to the line that you use, down to the internal of the bait, to just lead strips. Now with the 250, there's quite a few different ways that you can tune it. Now with the 250, it comes with like this skin, this rubber skin, and underneath the skin, there's these two weights in here that come. So there's one in the behind the front treble, and then one
and a slot for those weights,
a
like
slot,
in
yeah.
the bait.
So then you have like this lip here. You can put like that's I guess for the SKs, but that's for something else.
A plastic bill that was like a wake.
And then you have like the hinge design on this one. We'll show you guys like close-up shots of all this stuff, and then just like even like the water in the tail.
Yeah.
So
essentially, tune almost means like rate of fall or the sink rate. You know, you can think of it like that. Like so, you know, some people say like Butch Brown tune, but you talk to Butch Brown, he says he has like 100 and some ways that he can tune it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can mean anything from, you know, they come out the box as a slow sink, which is probably like, what would you say, almost a foot per second, not quite a foot per second. And then, you know, you can tune them to where they suspend in the water. So like boom, it'll just sit there and hang at 6 inches. And then you can, you know, and that changes the way that you can fish it, because of course, like one of the things I tell my people, you don't want this thing like to dead soldier in the water. It seems like our fish don't like that. So what I mean by that is like it gets the end of its glide, and then if you just stop and it just starts like just doing nothing and sinking. Right. Every time I've done that, I've seen my fish just turn around and leave. Yeah, they're like, that no longer looks real. It no longer has action, right? The action of the bait is when it changes directions. You know, the joint turns, it changes directions. On this one, the ball hits. All that stuff goes on, and then it like glides out. That's kind of, you know, it's still at least moving. But once it gets to the end of its glide, that's the end of the action, right? And then you kick it into action again and slow down action again. But if you know, that dead sink kind of just burp. So one, you know, to think of tune, you could think of it as like, oh, I could tune it to be fast sinking. Let's say I want to fish it really deep and 20, 30 feet of water, and I don't want to wait very long. I want it to get down there and stay down there. I can add weight to the bait, you know, or add bigger hooks or whatever, and change the actual tune so like the sink rate would go faster. Or I can, you know, hover it, or you can take out all weights and make it a top water like a punker that's like just awesome and really slaps around really good on the top. So that's what kind of tune means to me. And like you said, it involves everything from like the joints. I've heard that, you know, Butch can, you know, adjust the joints so that it even throws like further or farther, you know, whatever. So these are all kind of, you know, all things that have to do with the tune is like sink rate basically, or how it behaves.
A lot of it is like the sink rate, and like with the OG ones, you can like actually twist in like the hinges so that you can make like this glide tighter. And so what I've seen a lot of people.
Have you ever done that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you mess with that.
Yeah, I mess with that sometimes. So like the hinge like lets this like go side to side. So what you can do is you can like unscrew those so it like goes back, so it'll go more like. So like the tail will go
separated
out
more, right? Yeah, so it swings more.
It swings more, or you can tighten it so like you can swim it like really tight. And so I've got mine to where it's not like too swingy or too tight, and I just tightened it up just a little bit, and I like to swim on it just a little bit better. So that's another way that you can tune it. So again, there's multiple different ways. A lot of people, if you want to change out the weights, if you want to make it faster, a lot of people use tungsten putty. You can find tungsten putty at like your Hobby Lobby or anything like that. And it's just pretty much just what it is, tungsten in a putty form, and you can form it, and it's going to be heavier than what comes in here. This is like lead weight, and the tungsten's heavier than lead, so you can make it sink faster. So if you got one that noses up, you can take out this front, put in some tungsten putty, and it should keep the nose down. So again, there's multiple different ways on how to actually tune this bait from sink rate to just like the hinge design. So again, there's just a lot of
saying, especially like with the OG, like you would find that, say you bought 5 of them, and possibly all 5 of them would swim a little different.
Oh yeah.
So if there was a certain swim that you liked, it's almost like you had to tinker with it to get to that swim again.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't know everything about the business or anything like that, but I heard that, you know, the molds were getting old, and that's, you know, that was all part of the switch to the injection molded.
Yeah.
To keep it more standardized.
Consistent. And so that's kind of the whole basics of tuning. You guys can tune your own baits, of course. Just be careful.
You can take those outer shells off and refoil.
Yep.
Yeah, so you can change the colors.
Color out.
You know, you can
have them
add
repainted,
foil, less foil, more natural, more crazy. So yeah, and then now there's even people that like have figured out how to make flexible, you know, paint jobs on there that don't crack, and there's been some really neat ones.
So yeah, there's a lot of intricacies with this 250. I'll tell you that. All right, so now we're gonna talk about like the rod and reel line whole setup that we use for the 250. I think Manny Cheese got his stuff already ready.
All right, so. You know, I've had a lot of different blanks come to me from Lowdown Custom Rods. Really lucky to be sponsored by them. But like one of my still favorite blanks and rods that have been sent to me was one of the first ones. And it's a Lowdown Customs extra heavy parabolic. So it's a, you know, when looking at these baits, it's really just goes back to like basic fishing, right? We have a treble hooked bait. What do we want? We want a soft, a slow taper, right? We want that parabolic action to the rod that keeps the bait pinned to the fish, absorbs the shakes and the, you know, some of the hits that you may do. We're not setting, like I'm not doing these monster hook sets with these baits. No. We're basically just, boom, it's like a sweep to keep it tight, right? Sweep to tension. A lot of the same basics when we're using our top waters, jerk baits, crank baits. You know, it was the same idea. So, same with the rod. A more, you know, parabolic action. 8.6, 8 is fine too. 8.3 we're even messing with nowadays, and that seems to be an awesome length too. So I don't think, you know, the length isn't like super crucial. I love this one at 8.6 and parabolic glide. One thing that I start people off with is usually a 6-to-1 retrieve ratio. And what I like about that is that like when the bait gets casted out far, it seems like it's almost like 1 or 1.5 revolutions gets that bait to cut. So it's like a rhythm you can get into, right? And then once that, because you're using a 300 size spool, it is going to change, right? Because of physics or whatever, it's going to change your inch per turn pickup when it's very far out as to when there's like a certain line that you can like really visibly feel and see where it's like, whoa, it just now changed. When it's starting to get closer to the boat, and then that's where it, you know, it's picking up more line, so it's behaving different. And then you go from maybe a full or a 1.5 revolutions to like a half, and it's half. So again, it's just a very simple like rhythm to get into. I started using like 7s and even 8s just because I know like what the bait should be doing, how it's behaving in the water. I can feel what it's doing, but my revolutions are really like much smaller, right? So it's not like whoom, whoom. It's more just. But for somebody new to it, that might be a little hard to control. So still, like, you know, this is the grappler, which is a Tranx in the JDM version. It's a 300 HG, and that gives it like a 6.2 to 1 gear ratio. And then I switch out the handles to 100 millimeter because it comes with like that one paddle thing.
Oh yeah.
I don't really like that. I like just our normal style, you know, double. I have the RCS. The Daiwa and Abu fits on these Tranx. So that's the real change. And then the ratio, another thing I like about the Tranx, you know, this is, or at least this grappler also, these are made for almost like inshore saltwater, light jigging they call it. So you have a huge gear, big oversized gear. It sits low on the rod too, so you're nice and low, more than low profile. I don't have the biggest of hands, so for me this stuff fits really well. And when you get a fish, you can just crank them in. You don't have that torque problem. Added to all this setup is back to the rod, the 16-inch grip. You know, that is incorporated in the way that we cast these, baits. A big part of the casting too that I've like found that helps a lot is, you know, when you first start like casting bait casters, you think it's about click the button, hold this down, throw it, you fling it out, you let go, and then right before it lands, you put your finger down, like, wow, got it, okay, and then backlash. I kind of, with these big baits, they're heavier, there's a lot more flying in the air. So when things go wrong, for you to try to slow down a reel, like while it's, out there going, like it's just not going to happen. And that's when you start zinging off baits, right? You break the line, your bait goes away. So one of the big differences that I've found that I do is, again, use both hands on this and you're torquing. It's almost like you're pulling with this hand, you're pushing with that hand to load the graphite, let the weight of the bait load the graphite. And then I really feather this much more. So like you can hear it. When I cast these, it's like I'm always having like a break on it with my thumb. And what that does is if things start going haywire, I can easily put more pressure on the thumb and slow everything down. Or if I need more distance, I can like let off, right? But I have like somewhere to go. Instead of just from 0 to stop, I have like this feathering that's going on. And then also what that helps with, I found, is like if your bait starts helicoptering, which is when it starts, it catches the wrong wind or you kind of apply power at the wrong time and your bait starts flying through the air like doing upside downs and stuff. When you start slowing down right here, it all slows down and goes in the way it should, like the tail first and the nose is pointed at you. And another added benefit of that is like, I'm not scared of the splashes, right? That's something that like a lot of people are like, oh my God, this thing splashes so loud, it's gonna scare all the fish. Well, no. The fish we're after, they're looking for food that's this size. So when that water hits their lateral line, their swim bladder, it's all resonating, they right away key in and know like, oh, that's the size of thing that I'm looking for, that trout or that small bass or small carp, whatever. Like that's the size of bait fish that I'm after. It gets their attention, and we know that because we've caught many of them, not right when it lands, but it lands in like 1 or 2 swims, and boom, they're on it. And it's in shallow water or on a rock cliff, so obviously that fish was there, right? And again, just that kind of slowing down, it's not that I'm scared of the splash, but it helps it, there are a lot of splashes that I get that are just, much less than just a slap. And it's easier on the baits too, Our slide surfer, we don't have to worry about that, but when you have these other resin baits with sharp joints and sharp angles, if you're just hitting it in the water, like you're putting added abuse that it doesn't need, right? It's very easy to change that by just feathering that spool and being able to adjust that with your thumb. So that's kind of another thing about the Lowdown Customs that helps out a lot too is the spiral wrap. So, it starts off on the top and then it goes down to the bottom where it ends up almost like a spinning reel. But the neat thing about that is that the line, it is going to be less friction on the rod. You're going to have less weight because you're able to use smaller guides, right? You only have this front one that's really a bigger one, and after that you can taper down the size. So that means less epoxy, less size of material, less weight. And then the torque thing, when this bends down, your line goes from the top to the bottom. So you never have that line on the top like touching the blank. And in our game, when you're talking about these heavy, expensive baits, you're hooking into what could be the fish the fish you've been after for a long time. You need all of those, every added benefit, every the added advantage that you can get. So that's why this has definitely become my setup of choice.
What line are you throwing?
I throw 20, pretty much nowadays it's 20.
Yeah.
Sometimes, just because I spooled up something with 25, that I use 25, I don't think there's a biggish difference, but definitely I like 20. And then I like mono with trilene big game or Iserline copoly, which you kind of get like a little bit of the benefits of like the fluoro and the mono. But, I've heard things like, well, don't they see it? Are they line shy? Not when you're using a 10-inch bait. They're focused on this. They're not focusing on the little line. And another one that like took away that idea for me was the A-rig. How successful has the A-rig been in catching big fish, time and time again when like that's wires that are connected and swivels and all that junk that are connected to these little baits. So You know, yeah, as far as like invisibility or line shy, no. You know, these largemouths, they key in on the bait. They're not looking at the line. They're not affected by the line. You could use 20, 30. I think it starts affecting like your casting and probably the action of the bait a little bit.
Heavier line.
So sure. I wouldn't like recommend it, but you know, 20 has been a great line for me. And yes, you want stretch. I personally don't use fluoro if I'm using them subsurface. If I needed them to sink or something, then I may want some of that sinkability of the fluoro, but I don't use fluoro because, again, we're going back to that idea. Basic bass fishing treble hook 101. Stretch in the line, stretch in the setup. You know, the last thing you want, these have very small hook bends, so these can very easily, you know, if your stuff's too tight, if you're using braid, this can just rip right out of the fish and you've lost the fish.
Right.
You know, and then that is all added to like our fighting styles too. You know, I have some friends that fight fish really hard and they bend split rings, they bend hooks, you know, they bust line. I guess it's not that I fight them light. I crank down and I'm just cranking down on them, but I kind of, you know, I am also like just, you know, weary of like, hey, I don't want to absolutely have this 10-pound and just, you know, go like a maniac.
Right.
You know, so that, I think that adds to it all. And that's kind of my preferred setup. What do you like to do?
So I've got so this is an 8.3 Mohms extra heavy. I like the 8.3 so far. I mean, I've gone from 8 foot to 8.3. Again, it kind of just doesn't matter, but I just like this 8.3 on this Mohms blank. Again, it's pretty much the same thing as this Lowdown Custom. Just that longer handle allows for better casting, a lot more comfortable as well, able to get those baits out further. Again, spiral wrap, just like you said, helps with torque and then the line not touching the blank, which is a big key factor. Small guides, which I like, keeps the rod really nice and light. It's not a parabolic like his though, but it does have a little bit softer tip, so this is perfect for like the 250 or like the HPH, any of the smaller baits that have trebles, so you don't rip, you know, the hooks out of a fish's mouth when it does bite it. I'm using Revo Big Shooter by Abba Garcia. It's in a 6:1 gear ratio, if I'm not mistaken. So it is?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a little bit faster than I thought. Then this is
I love that reel.
This reel is so solid, and so it's a little bit faster. So I can just like, you know, quickly turn it on a dime or let it shoot out and then like quickly go. So a lot of my bites on this bait has come on like the little, you know, quick speed ups, and a lot of the times that it's a lot easier on this reel. But if you want to start off, I would definitely get like the slower gear ratio. I've seen like a lot of like the newer guys, when they try and throw like the 250 on my setup, they kind of have a little bit of problem
control.
And like and like on a far cast when they can't see it, like it's just I see it and like it's just doing this and that. When as soon as they see it, they kind of like get in rhythm, like
adjust.
And I'm like, all right, just do that out there now, and then they kind of just adjust. But it's a lot easier to do it on like a slower gear ratio reel. But like since we've been fishing this bait a lot, so we know what's going on. We can feel it in the rod with the reel and the line. We can even watch the line, you know, go side to side. So again, I also throw a 20-pound. I've got 20-pound Isoline on here, the co-poly. I like it. I think the lighter line maybe sometimes helps the bait swim a little bit better. Like you said, if you go like 30-pound, it might affect the swim. Again, line, it doesn't really matter what the fish eat, because again, the fish are just focusing on this. This thing's going crazy in the water, right? So, and if they look at this, and if they don't see the hooks that are right there, then they won't see the small line going to, you know, back to the boat. So again, line, it doesn't matter if the fish see it or not for us. It more matters on whether it's like fluorocarbon, to where like we're fishing like a jig hook bait on the bottom. We want almost like no stretch on like a far cast, or you know, mono or co-poly with this kind of stuff. So when we can see it, when fish eat it at the boat, a lot of times if you have like too stiff of a rod, you're just gonna pull that bait right out of its mouth. I've had
a lot of them eat it at the boat.
Oh, so many of them eat it at the boat.
That's critical, yeah.
When I first started like really throwing this, I was throwing it on like a super stiff rod, like no bend whatsoever in the tip, and like I'd get bit at the boat and just bait goes flying. And
we all saw those videos.
Yeah. Everybody knows those. So then I was like, man, what am I doing wrong? And so I was like, forget the 30-pound. Let's go down to like 25-pound mono. Let's get a little bit softer rod. So I started throwing it on my LDC. It's got a little bit softer tip. And like once they start eating at the boat, it's not like immediately. You kind of wait literally like half of a second. Yeah. And like that half seconds will make the biggest of difference on whether or not you actually land the fish or if you just pull the hooks out of its mouth.